They came almost unnoticed. A handful of rival supporters looking for trouble among the English fans. It started with some chairs, a flag torn down, a few unlucky targets. Tear gas spread the news of trouble to every corner of the square. Rivals turning to rioters in minutes as people fled. They took the fight into the surrounding streets, blocking exit routes. We watched from a nearby car park as this man, thought to be an England supporter, was brutalised and left with the broken bottles in the street.
Excusez-moi, s'il vous plaît, s'il vous plaît.
It's minutes before someone stops to help. And then this. Police say today's trouble involved small groups of English, French and Russian fans, but many more were caught between them. And no amount of chaos or tear gas can hide the swift, smooth hatred of acts like this. The violence has been getting worse each day in the run-up to this match. All along the port area, groups of England, France and Russia supporters have been clashing with each other and with the police. France has invested a lot in security around the stadium and the fan zone, but securing the city itself with its rival groups of supporters is proving to be the biggest headache of all. Police told us there were at least 31 people injured in the clashes today and 6 arrests. But the grim numbers that have graced this match won't change the score that matters on the pitch or the risk of what might follow. And there are fresh reports from inside the stadium tonight of Russian fans, after the final whistle was blown, throwing projectiles, advancing on the English fans. Meanwhile, here at the Old Port area, riot police have been moving into position as the city braces itself for possible more violence ahead.
Good evening and welcome to BBC News. UEFA will launch an investigation into fan violence at England's Euro 2016 match against Russia in Marseille. The start of England's Euro 2016 campaign has been marred by violence. 2 England football fans are reportedly in a critical condition in hospital, and many more have been left injured after a 3rd day of violent clashes on the streets of Marseille. After tonight's match between England and Russia ended a 1-1 draw, Russian fans appeared to attack England supporters inside the stadium. There were descriptions of utter panic amongst the England supporters and reports that women and children had been trampled. Well, on the pitch, England were dealt a blow as Russia scored a late equaliser just a few minutes before the final whistle. And Dan Rowan watched that game. We'll hope to speak to Dan in a few moments about the latest from what has been happening inside that stadium. But a little while ago, we got more from a BBC reporter, David Deacon, who works for Radio Coventry and Warwickshire. He told us what he had seen.
Upon the final whistle, Russian supporters broke a cordon between the 2 sets of fans and raced towards the England supporters, who had to run away in the opposite direction. Fireworks were being thrown at them along with flares, and the England fans had nowhere to go but to jump over what looked like a wall, which was about 10 feet. They were dropping down. Plenty of them were bottled in, almost in a crushing movement, and they were literally climbing over the barriers and dropping down to, simply put, to get themselves out alive. Russian fans swinging punches and kicks then went down into the concourse area of the stadium and come round the other side so they could meet the England supporters who were jumping down to get out of the way.
What seemed to have sparked this? Was it obvious?
It didn't seem to be. With about 8 minutes left of the match, Russian supporters let off a flare and a firework in the stadium, and there appeared to be some form of strobe lighting from behind the goal that Joe Hart was keeping. I can't honestly say what what would have sparked it was a line of stewards and some mesh in between the two sets of fans at that end of the ground. And the Russian supporters suddenly just ripped up the meshing. It's only a thin plastic material, pulled it out of the way, and the stewards stood back as they ran through in sheer numbers, overpowering them.
Another of our colleagues, Nick Erdley, who's in the stadium tonight as well, he said that he'd seen panic amongst the England supporters as that charge that you described happened, and that women and children seemed to have been trampled. How obvious was that?
It was obvious, certainly so. You could see people falling over the seats in a panic to get away. They're not the seats that we have in England where you pull down to sit down. They're fixed into the concrete of the stadium, so it's easy. They're almost like stairs all the way up. But as people were trying to get out of the way, they were tripping over the tops of the seats, falling down, and people were running all over them. It was complete mayhem.
It sounds then as if people could easily have been hurt in this. What evidence was there that the police and security services who are on duty tonight were trying to intervene and separate the fans?
I haven't seen a single police officer inside the stadium. I arrived as the gates opened at 6 p.m. local time. Lots of stewards around in yellow vests, but they are plenty of them. They're just there to liaise with supporters, tell them where to sit, where they can find toilets and bars, etc. There was no way they were going to get involved. They're just normal people, maybe football supporters that have got a job in a tournament that they want to see and then enjoy, almost like the Olympic ambassadors that we had in London in 2012. I didn't see a single police officer in this stadium.
That was Dave Deakin. Well, let's speak now to our sports editor, Dan Roan, who's on the line from Marseille. Dan, it was bad enough before the match, but it seemed to have all kicked off again after the game came to an end.
That's right, yes, and this is what will really worry the authorities, because it's one thing when violence flares in city centres or at transport hubs, very difficult to police, of course, at times, but when there's trouble and scenes of the kind that we've witnessed tonight inside a ground, then UEFA, European football's governing body, really does have some serious questions to answer. I'm actually speaking to you now from inside the stadium, the Stade Velodrome. I'm right next to the stand, in fact, in which those, what appeared to be some kind of stampede occurred. Just before the end of the match. Now, my experience of it was that I heard a loud bang, there were a couple of flares went off, and then suddenly there was a large rush of Russian fans towards the English fans who were towards the right-hand side of the stand behind one of the goals. There was very little segregation or attempt to keep the two sets of supporters apart, and that meant that when the Russian fans ran towards the English, many of the English fans tried to escape. They panicked by the looks of it and tried to jump over a metal perimeter fence, running up the side of the stand, which at its highest point is some 30 feet above the ground. And you can imagine how dangerous that could have been. I've heard reports of some women and children being caught up in that and being injured. Riot police, I saw a heavy line of riot police just outside the pitch area in the concourse surrounding the stadium in case the two sets of fans got together again. But if that rush was in some way triggered by that loud bang that we heard towards the end of the game, if that was some kind of flare or a stun grenade, the question is, how did that get inside the stadium? And why was there not better segregation, which may have prevented this happening? From what I can see, there weren't any serious injuries caused by it, but of course, whenever there is some kind of rush like that, and it is a rare sight, one thinks of some of the trouble that we've seen over the years in stadia, and I think that's what will make this be viewed with such seriousness. I've just spoken to one of the senior FA security personnel who told me that he's been trying to keep England safe in 9 major tournaments and has never seen anything like it inside a stadium in that time. So clearly this is something which will be of great concern to UEFA and to the French authorities as well.
How well segregated are the fans from the different countries in this stadium?
Well, I think in every other part of the stadium tonight, the segregation was pretty effective. For whatever reason, in the stand that I'm referring to, there was very limited segregation. It was merely a case of some tarpaulin being spread over a dividing line of seats, so 4 or 5 seats running up the middle of the stand from the bottom to the top, designating which was the English and Russian sections, but very little personnel to keep them apart. Now, they may have felt that the more high-risk fans were in different parts of the stadium and kept apart more effectively there, but clearly they underestimated the potential for there to be trouble. And as you said, this is now the 3rd night of trouble here in Marseille. This is meant to be a celebration, this tournament. England's fans' reputations have improved significantly, it has to be said, over the years. Banning orders have been brought in and they've proved effective. It was used to be called the English disease, didn't it? But clearly the sights that we've seen in Marseille over the last few days won't help improve that. Now, to be clear, what happened inside the stadium tonight appears to have had very little to do, or was not the fault of the English fans. It was the other way around. And from what we gather the last 24 hours, it's Russian fans as much as English, if not more, that have been the aggressors. On Thursday night, England fans were involved in skirmishes with local youths as well.